What's up, everybody? Chris and Chuck here to talk some Underdog Best Ball Mania draft with Chuck and Chris for Occupy Fantasy. How we doing today, Chris?
Chuck, always a pleasure to be here on the channel with you. Not the smoothest introduction, but hey, they can't all be winners, as they say. Happy to be here doing a little bit of a Father's Day stream with you. I know my son, when he's 1 year old, he woke up today and he said, "Dad, are you doing a best ball stream with Chuck tonight?" And I said, "Absolutely." So that's why we're here. I'm living up to his expectations. I am going to draft a Best Ball Mania 4 team on this show. Anybody that's kind of filtering in and watching along, I'll wait a couple of minutes before I enter the lobby here if you want to draft along. A couple of things I noticed, Chuck, using the ADP tracker on our website. Looks like we are starting to see some bets be placed on who the backup to Ramondre Stevenson is going to be with the Patriots. Pierre Strong with the New England Patriots, one of the highest rising picks in the ADP tracker over the last week. He's up 7 spots from basically no ADP to like the middle of the last round. So it looks like that's one of the flyers people are looking to start making. The leader of that ADP change, Chuck, is still Ty Chandler with the Minnesota Vikings. It is not rookie draft pick Dwayne McBride, who led the NCAA in rushing last season, according to one of our commenters. So I had to make sure we mentioned that on the show. Looks like Ty Chandler's getting more love than McBride right now.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. One of the things I pointed out was just draft capital to the Vikings. I mean, Dwayne McBride was a 7th-round pick. Ty Chandler was a 5th-round pick. NFL scouts are a better evaluator of talent than we are. And so, I mean, 5th versus 7th is much different than 3rd versus 5th, but it's still some of the only data we have to go off of. So that's what I'm leaning. It looks like the market agrees it's Ty Chandler. If it ends up being Dwayne McBride and you're going that route, then, you're going to get it's pretty good leverage, right? Could be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They left Ty Chandler mostly on ice last season, but obviously they held on to him. They must have liked what they saw there. A little bit of continuity with the coaching staff. So obviously we're going to wait for actual training camps to start, get some news there, preseason games, and that'll obviously shift some of these things around as well. But right now, these are the guys that everyone is betting on late. Ty Chandler with the Vikings, Pierre Strong, as I mentioned at the top of the show. Couple of guys we've talked about on a few different draft shows here. Tyjae Spears with the Tennessee Titans, Jerome Ford with the Cleveland Browns, Kenny Gainwell with the Eagles. They're all the most heavily drafted over the last few days at the end of drafts here, seeing their ADP tick up a little bit. They're all up about half a round. All right, I think that's enough of an introduction here, Chuck. I'm going to enter a contest, and you're obviously going to help drive the conversation, monitor any questions we get, talk through some strategy while we do that. Best Ball Mania already almost 25% full. We are coming up on, I think, a time of the year where more and more people will get into this. There's really nothing else going on other than baseball. And obviously the final game of the USFL regular season going on right now, if you're into such things. So, but it is peak best ball season now, Chuck. So I expect we'll get more talk throughout the rest of the summer. I am the only person in this draft lobby right now. So there are 11 people that we are waiting to enter the lobby and do a fast draft this evening. I'd be happy to go up against anyone that's watching that wants to participate in this contest. And kind of interesting, the last time we did a show together, Chuck, it was in the middle of the day. I think we saw significantly more badges in the contest. I feel like because it's a Sunday evening here on the East Coast, that there will be a little more participation from casual drafters here. So we'll see how it shakes out.
Yeah, I mean, I've mentioned it before. I'm typically a late night drafter. If I'm drafting like 10 in California, it's already 1 a.m. on the East Coast. And I find it could just be some kind of like bias I built in, but I do think that the draft rooms are you can get a little bit more value.
Now, I'm going to ask a question that I don't know if you're prepared to answer for me. In reviewing your performance in best ball contests from seasons past to other sports, is time of day that you drafted a data point that you keep? And do you see if there's any difference between your results against your pods based off of that? Or is that not something you're doing at this point?
So I didn't keep track of it, but I can tell you that the majority of my fast drafts were later at night versus my slow drafts. And my fast drafts, I perform better than my slow drafts, but that could be a function of fast versus slow. I think typically you're expected to do better in fast drafts. If you're a sharp drafter, everyone only gets to 30 seconds. You can make better decisions in your 30 seconds. And so I don't know how it would look. I imagine there would be a percent or two difference though in the late night drafts if I just had to guess.
I don't see. I got one user with a badge in here with me tonight, Spitfire 91.
Oh, this might
So
be a good one.
this may be a very very interesting contest tonight, Chuck. Let's hope for no quarterback trains in here. That would not be very fun. Although I guess it would allow us to experiment with some things without any real risk to it. Got the 11th pick here tonight. I would expect to have a pretty good shot here at landing CD Lamb with this pick. So that's kind of what I'm mentally gearing up for, unless obviously we get a few surprises ahead of me here. But CD Lamb from the Dallas Cowboys, Chuck, in the ever important Week 17 championship plays the Detroit Lions. So the absolute nut start here would be Amon-Ra St. Brown making it back to me in the second round. Not super likely based off of how ADP has moved around here over the last few days, but I guess that's what we're rooting for here.
Yeah, I think in one of the first streams we did, I mentioned that was probably my favorite combo to get because I was getting a ton of late round picks. And so drafting CD and then drafting Amon Ra. And it's kind of like, do you take it every time? And it's not available every time now. So every time I can get it, I do. And
Right.
something I saw some people doing, so they'll take Amon Ra first and then they'll take Tony Pollard in the second round for that different
Ooh.
kind of Week 17 correlation. Is that something you're interested in?
I don't mind it. Pollard's ADP a little bit closer to the end of round two, but obviously where we are on the board, we'll just have no shot at him whatsoever if we don't
Mhm.
take him at 14, which is something we talk about all the time. You know, you do reach a little bit to get a player if it fits your build. Um, I don't know, Chuck. I'm going to think about that here a little bit because I do think straight up, just by raw fantasy point projections, I do like Amon Ra a little bit better than CD. So
Mhm.
I've already taken CD a few times in this contest. I don't know. We got a couple more picks here until I actually have to decide. So if well, we still have Bajan, Eckler, and AJ here. I would expect all three to go in front of me, but if one of them makes it to 11, I will say I am interested. So we just gonna have to wait and see how it plays out.
With Bijan, it's interesting because I think he got as high as 6, and now he's back down to 9. So see where he ends up.
It looks like we're gonna. Well, we shall see any second now. It's basically Lamb or Eckler at this point. I think if Lamb goes, I might just take St. Brown, Chuck. I kind of like that start. I do think we talked about it in the last show, being invested in the Lions offense feels like it's where we want to be.
It's an interesting pick.
Lamb is not going to be there at 14, most likely.
Mm-hmm.
Amon Ra could be. So I think I'm going to take the gamble here, Chuck. I'm going to go with CD. I'm going to queue up Amon Ra. And if we don't get Amon Ra, we'll just go a different direction.
Well, hopefully. I mean, the only realistic combination is Austin Eckler and Devontae Adams, right, for this 12 guy. That doesn't
Yeah,
have Amon Ra. I mean,
if he goes straight up by ADP, he's got Eckler and Adams here. There goes Eckler. And there goes Adams. So now we
that's
get
beautiful.
the nut start week 17 correlation. And I've got a really good chance to game stack here with either quarterback that I like, depending on how the rest of the draft goes, with Dak Prescott and Jared Goff, because they both have double-digit round ADPs at this point, or I should say Goff does. Prescott goes a little earlier than that, but they're both at or after pick 100, so plenty of room here to build out the stacks a little bit more.
I think
Go ahead.
I was gonna say Goff ends up being the guy that I'm ending up with more just because of the guys around Dak. I'm usually wanting to draft them instead, and Goff seems like one of the best values at quarterback anyway.
So some other teams that I think we should look at that I'm definitely interested in. The Cowboys have the Buffalo Bills in week 15, the Dolphins in week 16, and the Lions have the Broncos in week 15 and the Patriots in week 16. So those are some of the secondary stacks that are available that I'm going to be looking at as the board develops here a little bit more. And I must say, I am more interested in, we already talked about them a little bit in the first round, the Pollard, Henry, Stevenson group than this Chubb, Taylor, Saquon trio. I don't think I have any exposure to those three backs that just went here yet. Feels like something I want to fix moving forward, Chuck. But that is something I've noticed in my approach here in the early part of the draft. I'm not landing on those guys really at all right now.
The only times I've taken Jonathan Taylor are when he falls past pick 20, and then I'm just like, okay, I don't have any. I'm going to take him because I'm not picking him at ADP ever. And then Saquon, I'm typically only taking to pair up with Cooper Kupp for that Week 17 matchup. Otherwise, yeah, I just have no interest in Saquon. Chubb is someone that I'm on. I'm okay getting to Chubb. And then from that later group, I actually was drafting Josh Jacobs a little bit too much over Ramondre and Derrick Henry. I kind of wish I got to more Ramondre. That's what I'm trying to do now. So out of those three, right now, my lean is Ramondre this week.
Especially in light of the Jacobs holdout news there. That's definitely
Mm-hmm.
something to probably be a little bit more defensive about if you've already got some Jacobs exposure in your portfolio. I like that. I like Pollard there. Higgins already went, so the Cincinnati correlation is a little tough with Minnesota. So I think a lot about number one because I haven't had it super often, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to get that Minnesota Cincinnati correlation when it's me. I do think Hurts and Jamar Chase probably a little bit of a unique combination. Chuck, we'll see what that owner does the 4-5 turn. I would think at this point they should not be interested in Joe Burrow.
No, but I mean, I've
We've
seen it so
seen,
many times.
yeah,
You know,
we've seen weirder stuff.
it's kind of like if you're going for two elite quarterbacks, it's not even really an advantage. Just so many people are doing it. I think they're doing it on accident because there's no way they're planning. Like they're just, oh, Jalen Hurts is here. You know, I'm going to take Jalen Hurts, and then Joe Burrow ends up being there. And I don't know.
You had posted some really interesting data in our Discord. I think it was in response to a commenter
Mm-hmm.
about adding the running back on top of a wide receiver quarterback stack in at least the regular season portion of this
Mm-hmm.
contest, Chuck. And I guess the context of why I'm bringing this up right now is I can tell you that provided going to stick to the rule of the channel, not say the player name, but provided the running back that lines up with my roster is still
Mm-hmm.
available here at the turn, Chuck, I do think I will do that here.
Yeah, I like it. So it's someone commented on, and I don't know what information I saw before that led me to believe it, but I went and made sure that it was true. There was a pretty good correlation for regular season, and it's just, if you think about it, I'm sure it's just more scoring means more opportunity for touchdowns, more offense, whatever. And then in the playoffs, it was mixed results, but the playoffs, it's just 1 week samples. So if the stack didn't perform that week, then, they probably had a negative result. But one interesting thing was, I think specifically Tyler Boyd and Joe Mixon, that pairing. Joe Mixon was a good player to have in one of the playoff weeks, and then Tyler Boyd was a good player to have in maybe week 16 or vice versa. And so that's something where you're still capturing that offense, and maybe this guy gets 2 touchdowns this week, this guy gets 2 touchdowns next week. It still gets you the stack through to the finals. And so even though the results didn't necessarily show it was super positive for the playoffs, I think it's still pretty powerful, especially with how much of the regular season prizes make up the prize pool.
Kind of all over the place a little bit at wide receiver.
Let's see what they got.
I'm coming around a lot more on a dramatic improvement for the Denver Broncos this season, Chuck. So
Mm-hmm.
I am going to take Jerry Jeudy here a little bit ahead of ADP just because there is some correlation with Amon-Ra in week 15. And I don't believe I have a ton of Jeudy in my personal portfolio here yet. And that gives me another shot at a late quarterback as well with Russell Wilson. So
Yeah, Jerry Judy's a guy I'm trying to get to. I saw a tweet earlier that was like all these fantasy touts are hyping up the Denver offense, but no one's specifically hyping up any Denver players. And to me, like Jerry Judy's the only one I'm super interested in. I'll take shots on Javonte and Cortland Sutton and then the tight end. But other than that, Dulcich.
And so the running back I was referring to was Jahmyr Gibbs. I do have a lot of him thus far. Kind of feel like I fell right into the trap when I was reading this on Twitter the other day. Think of Jahmyr Gibbs as like Alvin Kamara-esque.
Mm-hmm.
Dan Campbell, having some experience with the Saints earlier in his coaching career, knows exactly what kind of player he has in Jahmyr Gibbs. This is a role that they're likely giving to Gibbs over DeAndre Swift, who's apparently a player that they didn't really even like all that much because of how quickly they got rid of him. So I'm really high on Gibbs this year, Chuck. I feel like he could be a league winner.
Yeah, at first I was out on him. I'm like, why is he going so high? It doesn't really make sense. David Montgomery's right there at around pick 90, 87 something. But I'm coming around on Gibbs, and I'm still drafting a bunch of David Montgomery too.
I should say just the context of this roster at this point. I'm angling for more of the the Lions side of things and trying to get that correlation. I've got a correlation in the first week of the playoffs with Judy. I need some Patriots correlation, which I think exists in a couple of different spots throughout the rest of the draft. Maybe even with that late round running back we talked about at the top of the show.
Yeah. See what comes around.
And obviously, Mike D here with that start that you were referring to of Cup and Saquon for some correlation in week 17. I do think I talked about this in the strategy video that I posted for picking Cup in the middle of the first round here. I think I prefer correlating with Darren Waller, honestly, in that championship round. Obviously, there's more than one way to get that week 17 correlation with any of these players, but if you get the right tight end one on your roster, I feel like that's going to give you a massive advantage in any of these contests.
Oh yeah, I mean, especially during the playoff weeks. We talk about during the regular season. If a tight end gives us a touchdown and a couple catches a week, that's enough. But during the playoffs, there was one week maybe Hawkinson and Higbee both put up 25, and I mean, if you had a roster with both of them, that's just you're getting 40 points more than most of the other players in your pod at tight end.
So, and obviously, Fantasy Football Ninja here. Wish him the best of luck in contests that I'm not in because I want to win this one. Mm-hmm. But and just for the benefit of our members, viewers, subscribers, the reason we do not like this Jalen Hurts round 2, Joe Burrow round 4 start is it's not that we don't like these players. It's that you only can get one of these guys in your starting lineup every single week. You have a ton of your draft capital invested in this position early. And the problem there, Chuck, is you are missing out on any of these top 20 running backs, wide receivers that you could have selected instead of one of those guys. It feels like a very fatal error in a draft to do something like this.
Mm-hmm. Yep, completely agree. Think about it in terms of points added. You know, Joe Burrow had about a 20 fantasy point floor last year. Jalen Hurts, probably the same thing. And if they're only going to add 5, 6, 7 extra points, it's just you're taking too much of a hit. It's great for the playoff weeks if you can get your team through, but you have to hit basically home runs on your later round picks.
Mm-hmm. Like that's a roster that probably could have benefited at whatever, like the next best available wide receiver probably could have benefited from DK Metcalf instead of Jalen Hurts, since they're already all in on this Cincinnati Bengals stack with Burrow, Mixon, and Chase. I know obviously that's very early on Metcalf's ADP, but I do think that's something I talked about when you pick from the 2 slot, frankly. I think there's a lot more upside doing something like that. Get some correlation with the Pittsburgh Steelers in round 5, 6 with either Deontay Johnson or George Pickens. Like those are the things that I'm trying to do when I pick from that slot personally.
I find myself drafting a running back most of the time from there. I'm not getting as much DK. I know I need to.
Yeah, I'm almost trying to force myself to pick more DK. I think that's why I kind of talked about that strategically. I can't say I've gotten to it much in practice. I don't think I've had the 2 pick in quite a while. I've been picking down on this section of the board throughout the better part of the last week and a half when I've done a show with you or done a draft on my own. So it's just kind of the way it goes sometimes. All right. I don't really have an active plan at this point. I probably need to think a little bit more about that. A Charger player would be good correlation with Jerry Jeudy. There really isn't one that stands out because they've all gone at this point. I don't think I'm going to take tight end here. I think I'm okay. Waiting. Just looking at the next available players. I'm not really in love with any specific player here. So obviously I'm a little light at running back. The board won't come back to me until about 83. I think there's a couple players there that I can take that I'm okay with. So at wide receiver, I am heavily exposed to this player, but Mike Evans is my favorite one in this range. A little early for him, but I am going to take him here.
I like it.
And I do like having a bunch of elite wide receivers early. So especially guys that I know I can pair with some cheap quarterbacks late. I think it just gives me significantly more options throughout my draft.
Especially if you're going to take a running back or 2 with your next on the next round of picks, the rosters just look so much better when you have these clean receivers, especially the 3 you started with.
and just a ton of receivers that go around here. Can say my favorite one in this range. I'm trying to get a little more of him is Tyler Lockett. I've taken JSN a couple times. I've talked about JSN in the strategy videos I've posted because I'm mostly just going by like best available player by ADP for those. But these two guys, as it just happened here tonight, they always go right next to each other. I'm basically just kind of alternating between selecting them to make sure I have an even selection. I do think I want to say I saw respected analyst. I know Brian's partnered on him with some projects before. Justin Freeman from Run the Sims, talking about the Seattle offense. He posted some of his 2023 projections with his simulation tool. And I do agree with what he said about Seattle, which is it's kind of hard from a math standpoint to project the big role for JSN, at least right away. I do think that this offense is at least going to start the year out still pretty heavy with both Lockett and Metcalf here.
I mean, it sounds right. I They might be the team I'm most exposed to. It's just not many teams have that many players I'm interested in. I'm surprised how much Zach Charbonnet I'm actually getting to around pick 100, whatever it is,
Mm.
on top of the receivers. I mean, the playoff correlation is great, so that probably has a little bit to do with it too.
So went with a couple of players that don't necessarily correlate with the build I have so far, but opening up the board a little bit for me to consider some options. Evans has a week 17 correlation with the Saints. There's some Saints players that go late that we like. Lockett with a correlation in championship week with the Steelers. But now I'm also mildly interested in some players from the Packers, the Jaguars, the Eagles, and the Titans because there's some quarterfinals and semifinals week correlations there with each of those two teams. So we're in a good shape here, I think, to consider a few different paths depending on how the board goes over the next dozen or so picks here.
Green Bay is such a good off. I mean, they're not a good offense, but their playoff correlations are great with the players we're interested in. I mean, if you hit a Minnesota player, but just we've talked about it. There's the Green Bay players are so rough. Bad
Yeah,
offense.
we don't know what to expect from them. We've got Jordan Love taking shots at Bears fans on social media, wishing them a happy Father's Day. I feel like that's a little aggressive from Mr. Love, but we've seen Jordan Love get a lot of run in preseason, and he's looked good in spurts. I mean, obviously, the major caveat there is it's preseason. He's playing backup defenders, but in a not too dissimilar position to Aaron Rodgers when he first started. He's had plenty of time to get seasoned in Mike LaFleur's offense there and kind of learn what they're all about and what they're trying to accomplish. So if you're into the Packers, you just got to hope that maybe he's ready to go and he's been ready to go. And now it's time to answer the call, right?
Yeah, they'll all pay off their ADPs except Christian Watson. I mean, Christian Watson. I mean, I should say exceed their ADPs if Jordan Love is good. I have a tough time seeing Christian Watson exceed his ADP. I think we're hoping
Yeah,
that he
I'm
just matches it, right?
definitely most interested in Dobbs relative to Watson as far as cost is concerned. I just feel like Dobbs is far more likely to be worth the investment with what 10th, 11th round picks. So we are definitely on the same page there. There are. I'm not expecting this player to still be here when I'm on the clock, although he could be because his ADP seems to be falling. I'll say his name because I'm truly not interested. It's Isaiah Pacheco. I see his ADP is now in the 80s. It's been in the 70s for the vast majority of May and early June. So little skepticism with Pacheco now, I guess, from the market.
Yeah, Pacheco's falling. Sky Moore, I think Sky Moore moved up a couple spots, and then Rashi Rice was falling too. Jerick McKinnon, I don't know if he actually did, but he was at like 128.
Early for Michael Thomas, relative to when he's been going anyway. That was interesting.
Michael Thomas, I'm taking him a little bit on teams where I feel like I'm weak at receiver. I need a home run. If it doesn't work out anyway, then the team's not advancing.
I was curious if that was Waller going to the Cup Saquon owner, but it was the next spot over. Feel like Mike D would have benefited from going Waller there over Gabe Davis, but I got my own team to worry about, so that's fine. All right. I still have not gotten enough Jahan Dotson. I feel like I need to get more of him personally.
It's so funny. I'm looking at my exposures earlier, and in my top 7, I think I had Curtis Samuel and Terry McLaurin, but I have maybe 2% of Jahan Dotson, and I'm not taking the quarterback either. So need to figure out something there, balance it out, I guess, get more of that guy, whoever it is.
So this is kiss of death, I guess. I said I wasn't expecting him to fall, but I'm fine with value, especially when it's on the best offense in the league. I need some running backs. I'll take Pacheco here.
Don't hate it. I haven't been taking him, so I'll probably start adding him a little bit if he keeps
Yeah,
falling.
I'm not reaching for him, but if I can get him behind ADP, I'm more than okay with it. And then the other player that I really like in this range at running back, I do like David Montgomery, but since I already and obviously he comes off, since I already have Gibbs, I wasn't really super interested in him anyway. I don't have a direct correlation for this player, but I am feeling light at the running back position. I don't at this time feel like I need to go quarterback just yet. So I'm going to take James Conner from the Arizona Cardinals and add to my heavy exposure with him in my best ball portfolio. But as I've talked about several times on our show here, I think he's one of the best picks at this range of the running back position. So I'm more than happy to load up.
I love it. Tough thing about him is the week 17 correlation if you don't already have one of the early guys from the Eagles.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to get the. I mean, Gainwell is probably the only out left for correlation with him if I want it, but I'm not going to force it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something we've talked about. Is obviously we want to correlate, but it's that fine line of just trying to make sure we're maximizing our upside and not just correlating for the sake of correlating.
Yeah, two running backs for the playoff weeks. Like, if it's the players you want, I'm not avoiding it, but it's not something I'm targeting.
And I think just from ignoring the players for a second, I got 3 running backs. I've got 5 receivers here through the first 8 rounds. I feel like philosophically, this is a good way to approach building a roster. Expected points added to your team. You mentioned that earlier in the show. I think that's a great frame of mind to get yourself in when you're drafting for a contest like this. As it gets later in the draft, these kind of mid tier, I guess, you know, QB2 tier quarterbacks, these tight ends that are left, they start to probably become significantly better investments in this range of the draft because they're far more likely to be pretty close to the guys at their own positions that go ahead of them, and you get them at a significant price discount.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Do you kind of feel like a lot of times you're punting one position?
I think you kind of the nature of these contests is you almost have to a little bit, especially when you approach it the way that we are, when you kind of land a couple players early and then you know, okay, I need to build around those teams, the
Mm.
Cowboys and the Lions is kind of what I am prioritizing here. And obviously the start here where I got 5 wide receivers in my first 6 picks. Um, Before I went Pacheco Connor, I definitely was thinking, okay, this is not going to be a very strong running back team. But the way the board fell to me, I actually feel pretty good about both positions here. I think where I'm going to end up light here is a position I am fine more often than not being light is the tight end position. Because after you miss I would say after Waller's gone and all these guys that go behind before him in blue at the tight end position, you've already missed the elite tier at tight end.
Yeah.
So there's really no reason to prioritize any of these guys who go in the immediate range after that, unless they fit your team.
Mm-hmm.
Because I just don't think the expected points added are truly that much above what's left, round 14, 15, et cetera, et cetera.
I like it. I like it. I mean, my team's personally, like I said earlier, like if I have a few good receivers early, especially in the first 2 rounds, and then 3 running backs who we expect to start, and then just take, maybe Higby or Chig or something, and
Mhm.
then punt the last 2 rounds with tight end grab. Do you think you're going to end up taking two or three quarterbacks here? I guess depending which ones you grab.
It depends on what falls to me. I'm kind of mentally geared up for 2 quarterbacks at this point,
Okay.
which would probably lead me to lean towards 3 tight ends. I may, depending if everything falls cleanly, Chuck, we may just bang tight end in the last 3 rounds. Here is kind of what I'm thinking.
It's been my go-to. So one of my problems when I'm doing that is I'm taking mostly 2 of the 3 same guys every time, like Mike Gesicki or Hunter Henry, who's ever there, Hayden Hurst, guys like that. I mean, a couple of them seem undervalued, but I hate being. It feels like my builds are so similar when I do that.
I don't think this is the sexiest pick here. And obviously, there's some risk that I won't get Dak Prescott with CD, but I'm going to take Tyler Boyd and get what I think is a pretty good Week 17 correlation with Pacheco in what's probably the best game environment of that week.
I love it. Tyler Boyd's pretty sure he's in my top 5 highest exposed receivers so far, strictly for that Week 17 correlation. And he's a good player.
And so, since I feel like I have done very, very well at the most important positions on the board here, running back and wide receiver, I've already loaded up pretty good. I think I am a little early here, but I do want one of the quarterbacks from that Week 17 game that I hammered early with the wide receivers. At this point, it is going to have to be Jared Goff. So I'm going to make sure I get him and that I don't miss out.
Kind of surprising that guy took Dak. Did he have Brandon Cooks?
Yeah, let's take a look. I think he may have. I feel like I saw Cooks go. I don't know. He didn't. Rush TB here has Brandon Cooks. So we've got a Dak Prescott. That gentleman also has Deshaun Watson. Maybe he's thinking Amari Cooper's still in the Dallas Cowboys. I don't know. So he's got a Dak Prescott with no teammate here. Obviously, Michael Gallup is still out there. So we'll see what he does here. Either way, we have gone down the Jared Goff path here tonight.
And reaching for Goff here, it has to be correct, right? We have 2 Detroit players. It's kind of a disaster if we don't get Goff, since that's what
Right.
the whole team is planned around.
Yeah, and that's I'm fine with reaching for players when it makes sense for the team that we are building. It's the type of thing we need to do in this tournament environment to make sure we're getting the build strategically that we're aiming for. We don't want to reach like 40, 50 picks or anything like that. It's just Goff's ADP is like 128. I was at pick 110. My next pick isn't until 131. He could have still been there at 11. I don't think there's a tremendous reason for anybody else on the board to be super interested in him. But as we just saw, that isn't going to stop people from taking players. That's, Dak Prescott just went to a roster that didn't necessarily make sense for him. So those are the things we have to keep in mind. As much as you and I and others are trying to plan out these drafts in somewhat intelligently and take players that fit our builds, we don't know what we're up against in the draft room here. We can't assume. I guess I'll say this the other way. We can assume other players here are not doing that and they're just YOLO picking, and that's going to blow up our strategies. So we got to be prepared for that.
That's something that I have not. I just don't do that though. Take a quarterback like in this range without having one of the receivers before him. If I don't have a quarterback yet, I'll just go with 3 of the later guys and try to make something work.
I'll try to be kind here. I think there's plenty of ways to build a roster that make more sense than that. We'll just leave it at that. Sky Moore is definitely someone that you mentioned is rising. I have not had the opportunity to select him yet. I definitely feel like I'm buying in. Had really good Super Bowl and playoffs for the Kansas City Chiefs late, so obviously has earned some more trust in big spots for them. Definitely feel like regardless of whether or not it works, if I am overexposed to Chiefs Bengals in Week 17, Chuck, I feel like I did things correctly this summer because I'm having a hard time seeing how that game environment is not going to be worth having some pieces of here.
Absolutely. No, I love
Seen
it.
weirder things happen. Obviously, it was a Patriots game stack in Week 17 last year that brought home the bacon. So we definitely are going to invest in these other game environments. But I don't believe any of the books in Vegas have put out totals for Week 17 yet. We may not see those for some time here, but we can assume Kansas City and Cincinnati is on track to be one of the higher total games that week. So that's the biggest reason it makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Some other games that I'm really stacking. Seattle, Pittsburgh. That might just be the players, though. A lot of Deontay, a lot of one of the Seattle guys.
Baltimore, Miami, I like early if you get any of those early players. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Mark Andrews, Lamar Jackson. Buffalo, New England is another one that I think is pretty good to get to early. Diggs, Ramondre, Juju Smith-Schuster, Gabe Davis, Josh Allen. That should probably be another fairly high total game in Week 17. I've built a few teams. They're kind of weird with Cleveland and the Jets. I think that's depending on how the season goes, that game could go either direction. It could be really, really good at the end of the season, or it could be pretty bad. We know the weather in both of those parts of the country. I don't know who's the home team there that week. could be pretty bad in January. So that's one variable to keep in mind there. But Dallas, Detroit, we've got a couple of domes there. We should have perfect football conditions. And so that's what we're rooting for with this team that we're building here tonight.
That's a really interesting point you just made. That's something I actually hadn't considered that much, was weather in the playoff weeks.
I mean, especially, the northern part of the country, the Northeast, where these teams play outdoors. Buffalo, New England, obviously, again, I'm not sure who's home that week, but that game is going to be very cold, right? There could be some weather there. So it's way too early to speculate on that, but we know what the seasonal trends are. Being invested in some of these significantly friendlier environments is going to lend itself to better chances for scoring. That data is well known amongst, football gamblers, right? Dome environments are significantly more favorable to offense. So if we can find opportunities to stack some of these games in the playoff weeks that have those favorable environments, we're obviously going to have to take as much advantage of that as we can. So I have to make a pick now. That's typically how these things go. I am okay. I did take Tyler Lockett. This is a little early, but I do like Jalen Warren here. I haven't taken enough of him yet. And I also like Romeo Doubs. So I'm going to take him first because he goes a little ahead of Jalen Warren. But my plan here is to get Jalen Warren after the turn.
I like it. So Jalen Warren, I think when I talked about him before, I wasn't really considering his standalone value, just considering if Najee gets hurt. But he might have some standalone value just if he gets a few carries.
I'm seeing some speculation that we are not a lot of, again, credit to Justin Freeman, not expecting Najee to be the 3-down back he's been in years past. We feel like, I guess the analyst community feels like Warren may have earned some more touches just in general, even with Harris in the lineup. So that'll be very interesting in fantasy this year. And he fits Tyler Lockett on this team for another week 17 correlation. I think I said that already, but just making sure I reiterate that here. Dobbs fits a playoff correlation with Mike Evans in week 15. So that was one reason I was interested in him here as well.
You going to be interested in one of the Minnesota running backs?
Yes. Obviously, now that I have Green Bay explicitly on this roster, we should be looking at Ty Chandler or the leader in the NCAA in rushing yards last year. Can't stress that enough on this show tonight, Chuck. Dwayne McBride is definitely out there to be selected if I choose to do so.
I think we talked about him a little bit too. KJ Osborne is someone that I'm adding who just get more exposure to Minnesota's offense.
So I got a week 9 bye for Jared Goff. So I need at least a second quarterback, and that's the landmine I have to avoid. Jordan Love would fit with Dobbs now that I have him. It's within a 50% chance that Love will still be there at 155. So I guess I could consider that. Baker Mayfield with Mike Evans, I guess, is my other next best option that's left here to select. So I guess those are the quarterbacks I'm considering at this point.
One thing with taking Baker, if you're only running a 2-quarterback build, I know that I'm expecting Goff to be better than his ADP, but it's still kind of scary. If Baker doesn't end up starting the whole season, then we're basically running it with Goff. So it's like I find it tough to draft these guys unless I have 3 quarterbacks on my team or I have one of the top 6 or 7 or so quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think obviously I broke the rule. It's not going to happen now. I would feel significantly better about getting Jordan Love just because I think we feel a little bit better about him at least holding on to his job for the majority of the season. So we'll see how things go here. It's within reason that he's available to us, but it's not incredibly likely. DM Larson is the owner I'm most worried about here, although he already has 2 quarterbacks. I'm only mentioning him because he's the one who selected Christian Watson.
Yeah.
Okay, Irvin and Alec Pierce. Taking Alec Pierce over Rashee Rice is definitely a choice. I don't know if it's a choice I would make, but it's one that was made tonight. He already has Tony, so I guess he's placed his wager on which chief receiver is the one worth owning. So I guess it's not as bad as I thought.
Even if I don't have Pat Mahomes, the Chiefs are a team that I don't feel super uncomfortable drafting two receivers from. With Tony, it might be different because that might be an overpay. But if I'm getting like Sky Moore and MVS or Rashi Rice, then it feels fine.
Things are pretty thin here at tight end now, but I think there's still some good potential here. I'm only mentioning it because it's a position I have nobody from yet. Komet, I feel like this is I like the player a lot, but I feel like this is a trap pick at this point, especially now that we have some early returns on OTAs, where it sounds like Bob Tanyan is the one running with the first unit in Justin Fields right now. I would much rather pay absolutely nothing in the last round of a draft for Bob Tanyan than use a pickup here on Komet. It may not sound like a lot. It's a 13th round pick in fantasy football. How valuable is that? Well, we're in a best ball format. We don't have the ability to change our roster at all throughout this contest. That's a pretty high pick to invest in a player that may not even be a starter, right? So I feel like Komet is someone I'm avoiding at this point unless we get different news.
We talk about guys in the 18th round. He might not contribute a point to your roster the whole season, but if your 13th, 14th, 15th round guys don't, then that's a problem.
Mm-hmm. But these tight ends, especially if they're my TE2 or my TE3, they catch a touchdown or two in a few games throughout the year. Obviously, that's going to be a big lift to my scoring relative to everyone else in my pod because they're not likely to get any contribution from their week 18 pick or round 18 pick, excuse me. Definitely no contribution from their week 18 pick. There's no basketball contest that week either. Okay.
Well, imagine you take a 18th round tight end and he returns 13th round value. And I mean, you're winning.
Right. That's an extremely good wager that you made on that player. Okay. A couple of picks away. We have Gerald Everett off the board. I can live with that. Provided these next 20 seconds go favorably for me, Chuck, I think I'm going to get my player that I want here. And then it does seem like I will have a chance to get another wide receiver. It would be my 8th wide receiver. Boy, I don't think Weak Sauce needs a quarterback. Mm-hmm. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to roll the dice here. I'm going to take KJ Osborne for that correlation with Dobbs that we talked about him as a player that you want to get a little more of. Mm-hmm. I now have my first share of Mr. Osborne, and this was a big risk, but I think I may have a chance, and I do, to still get Jordan Love as well on the back end.
Yeah, it's just that's a really nice combo you just picked up right there.
So now I've got 2 week 17 game stacks with my quarterbacks that are available to me. I feel pretty good about that.
Oh yeah. What's did we already hit Green Bay's week 15?
So Green Bay's week 15 is
that Tampa
Mike Bay? Evans, Tampa Bay. So okay. A Carolina Panther, if there's one lingering out there that fits my team, would be the semifinals week for them. And I'm in the same position with the Lions. I need a New England Patriot for some correlation there. And there's definitely still some players from the Patriots that I could select. So I feel okay there. And they actually are coming from a position I still need too. So I think that may be the direction I go.
Nice. Carolina fits that too. That's something I find myself doing just to get that correlation is late round tight ends.
Credit where credit is due is always a good habit to have in any industry you work in. I want to say Adam Levitan established the run. He's one of the only writers I remember seeing post something, so I'll definitely give him credit. Feels like Khalil Shakir, from some reporting in Bills camp, has a real shot to be in some of these 3 wide receiver sets for the Bills this season. So I actually am coming around on taking him here in the 14th, 15th round, although that is, hold on a second here. 160, I think, is a little early for him. His ADP is 189 at this point. So I will say this spot might be a little early, but just in general, I'm interested in Shakir because it does seem like there's a good chance he'll be on the field for the Bills. And not only that, Chuck, if there's any truth to this smoke on Diggs being unhappy with Buffalo and anything changes there, Shakir is obviously one of the players that will benefit the most from an opportunity change with Josh Allen.
Oh yeah. I don't know if I'll get to Shakir. Maybe you're talking me into him. I'm just coming around on Gabe Davis at ADP. So I think I can get there though.
it feels like the more likely thing in the range of outcomes here, Chuck, is that if there's no Diggs,
Hmm.
then Buffalo may be like in a lot of trouble. I feel like that's more likely than one of these secondary receivers just being this amazing play. But
Right.
history has proven time and time again that the talent at the quarterback position on these elite offenses can definitely overcome some talent, lack of talent, I guess, at the skill position. They can elevate those guys. We saw
Hmm.
Tom Brady do it for years. We're seeing Patrick Mahomes do it now. I would say Josh Allen is in that category as well as a talent at the quarterback position. So that's why I think I'm willing to take those risks with these players.
I love it, especially with Khalil Shakir. Everyone's still on, not as much, but is it Dalton Kincaid? Like he's still
Mm-hmm.
going way higher than he probably should be. So just get Shakir, get that leverage. I'll probably take him in my next draft now.
Because we talked about him so much tonight. I definitely feel like that's the way it goes sometimes. We just kind of talk about a guy, and it's like, all right, I have to get him now.
Right.
I'm still more interested in just to stay on Buffalo, I guess, for a second, even though I'm not aiming for them on this roster. At cost, I still think I'm on Knox over Kincaid at this point. Might be a
Mhm.
mistake, but there are far more ways to survive being wrong about Knox at cost on your roster than Kincaid right now.
Yeah, I agree. I'm in on Knox, but I'm in on late round tight ends, and he's got to be one of the best.
Yeah.
Just being on the Bills period is enough.
I probably spoke too loudly about the New England tight ends, so I can't be super surprised about Mike Gesicki coming off the board here. Little ahead of ADP before
Hmm.
coming off before Dawson Knox and Tyler Conklin, who are a couple of tight ends that in general tend to go ahead of him. All right, that's fine. There are other options here we can close out the draft with. I've got two quarterbacks, four running backs, eight receivers. Let's look at my receivers again really quickly here. Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jerry Jeudy, Mike Evans, Tyler Lockett, Tyler Boyd, Romeo Dobbs, and KJ Osborne. Honestly, Chuck, the way this team came together, I feel like I'm done with wide receivers tonight.
I think so. Yeah. You took 4 in your first 5 picks, ended up with 8. Seems perfect. So we have a couple comments. Alex DYM, I guess probably said this a while ago. They drafted Bijan before Jonathan Taylor. That's crazy. Yeah, man. If you think it's crazy, hop on Underdog and get Jonathan Taylor 7, 8 picks later than Bijan in every draft you enter.
Yeah,
Um,
that is the consensus right now. If you're just getting into best ball, Bijan Robinson is a first round pick this year. Taylor is consensus second round pick, so that is definitely in line with expectation right now. Let's see. Yeah, I think I'm gonna take Hayden Hurst here. Obviously, I like Knox, but Hurst fits the roster. That's the guy I want here. Some correlation in Week 16 with the Green Bay Packers, and I think I'm going to take a few tight ends in this range, so I'm okay with taking him here because I'll come back around and let me just make sure first. Okay. I am going to take Knox as well, just to have a little bit more, I guess, safety, if you will, at the tight end position because I have none at this point, so I'm fine with slamming a couple here.
I love it. And I think we're coming up on Joshua Kelly's ADP. WW asked, how do we feel about Joshua Kelly? Second in depth chart. If Chargers don't get another running back, he should be a steal at ADP. No. I'll let you take this one, Chris.
I appreciate that. Let's take a look at the Los Angeles Chargers. I can't say I am confident in my read on their backup running back situation at this point. I would say Joshua Kelly is locked in on most depth charts you can find. Our Lads football is kind of the most popular one people can find that's not owned by a team as the RB2. But let's keep an eye on what happens with Isaiah Spiller, who did not really do a ton last year, and Larry Roundtree. These guys are still hanging around on the roster. I just kind of feel like the role for Eckler is so unique that if he goes down, I do not think the usage is anywhere near the same for these other running backs on the roster. I think you'll see more traditional early down running back between the tackles usage. Let's get every cliche I can about a running back in, right? Eckler has a very, very good role in the passing game. And I think if he were to go down, it's more likely that the receivers benefit from that than any of these backup running backs. So I guess that's kind of how I'm thinking about the backup running backs on the Chargers. I'm not super interested in them, honestly.
I like it. I look at Joshua Kelly late in drafts when I need a running back on my team, and he's never the guy I end up clicking on in the end. So I think I have 0% right now.
Trying to get caught up on a couple of the picks here. And obviously, Kelly probably the best one to wager on as the guy to own here if you're interested in that spot. I'm just obviously one man's opinion. I'm not super interested in backup Charger running backs, just to, I guess, tie a bow around that. I may want one more running back here, maybe. I don't know. I am okay with this group. Gibbs, Pacheco, Connor Warren. There are a couple of options rising the boards. We talked already about the Minnesota running back that we like, the highest ADP rise over the last week on Underdog Fantasy. So that's certainly worth considering. There is a Patriots running back, too, that the field is wagering on as well that's sitting here for me. So I might take one of those players as my fifth running back here and probably one more tight end, depending on the direction things go over the next few picks here. Chase Claypool, interesting player. Obviously, Ty Chandler's gone. So I guess if I want a Viking running back, Chuck, it will be the running back that led the NCAA in rushing yards in 2022. Dwayne McBride would be the option now. Just can't stress enough that Dwayne McBride led NCAA football in rushing yards last season. I feel like that's something one of our viewers wants to know.
How translatable is that to the NFL level?
I guess it just means that he is able to handle the workload, right? Obviously, leading his team, not just his team, but the entire NCAA in rushing yardage, was clearly a high volume running back. So if he's thrust into a bigger role in this Vikings offense, it seems like he's able to handle it. I think that's the biggest takeaway we can have.
I mean, the way I look at it is he led the NCAA and he still only got picked in the 7th round. So, you know,
yeah, that's a very good point, actually. Obviously, the NFL draft analyst community, these men are actually men and women who are actually employed to analyze these players, were not super interested in him. So that is definitely a data point we should probably be more sensitive to. Hunter Henry as a third tight end with the Patriots correlates with my Detroit Lions stack that I built out here as well. I feel pretty good about having these three tight ends because I feel like I can bet on any of these guys having some touchdown equity throughout the season. So I feel very, very good here. And then at running back, there's just, how can I not, right? We've talked about him so much tonight. I'll get Dwayne McBride on this roster.
Let's do it.
I feel pretty good about this team. A little different than I thought it was going to go when we first started, but feel very good about starting with the Lions and the Cowboys. That's a pretty good Week 17 game. I definitely, you mentioned at some point earlier in the show, you tend to look back on these drafts and feel like you're weak at a position compared to the rest. If I had to pick one on this team, Chuck, it's probably quarterback. Jared Goff and Jordan Love isn't the sexiest quarterback room. So it's probably the weakest unit I have on this roster.
Well, that's why we draft the elite wide receivers early so that it doesn't matter as much. Right.
I just think on a week-to-week basis, even with the guys at the top of the quarterback projections table, any projections you can find out there, Hurts, Mahomes, Burrow, Lamar Jackson, I think these guys are likely to average 20 to like 23 fantasy points a week. Mm-hmm. The vast majority of the rest of the quarterbacks, they're going to live in that 16 to 18 fantasy point per week range, and they're going to spike up into the 20s from time to time. So I just feel like the quarterback production is much flatter than people realize, and that's why I'm okay with waiting at that position. Not a new take. I think taking late round quarterbacks has been a popular and profitable strategy in the past. Obviously, we've seen the emergence of some more successful dual threat quarterbacks like Hurts change the math on that a little bit, but as long as we are correlating effectively at our skill positions, which I think I did do here tonight, that should give us a chance to still be successful against those other rosters. Again, all due respect to FF Ninja. I hope he has a lot of teams he's building that'll be successful. I do not think going Hurts Burrow here is the right way to do it. I would declare that team already kind of dead in this contest. He's got obviously Goddard paired with Jalen Hurts, but very, very weak at wide receiver. Only took 2 wide receivers in the first 7 rounds. Just doesn't feel like the optimal way to build in this particular format. So, yeah.
Yeah, the couple times I've caught myself in that spot where I've only had a couple of receivers through like 6 rounds, 7 rounds. I have the top running backs. I have Kelsey or Mark Andrews. I have one elite quarterback. So
that is going to wrap it up for the evening here, Chuck. I guess there's a couple of orders of business we should wrap up before we let everybody go from this show. Obviously, thank you everybody for watching. If you're new to Underdog Fantasy, we do have a promo code that you can use to sign up today and get a match on your initial deposit. Promo code Occupy1. It is listed in the description of the video below. You sign up. If you deposit up to $100, Underdog will match that 100%, give you $200 to start playing Best Ball Mania 4, Pick'em contests, really anything you want here on Underdog. We definitely recommend that you do that. Looks like the Dalmatian, a 3 max contest that is available slow or fast draft is in here. There should be another puppy contest, 150 max, $5 per entry contest that'll be coming out shortly. We don't have a report from our Underdog rep on specifically when that'll be coming out, Chuck, but we can definitely bet on that coming out sooner rather than later. So that'll be another good contest for people to get into. I think we will be back on, as of right now, the plan is Wednesday evening around 9 p.m. on the East Coast. Not sure who's going to be on that stream, but we will have that announced in our Discord as soon as we have that information for you all. And I will have the final edition of the strategy series that we've posted on the channel that will live on the channel for the rest of the summer here. How to attack your drafts depending on which pick slot you start with. I will have a video on the 10th, 11th, and 12th pick slots coming out on Friday. That's the upcoming agenda for the week here on the channel. That is it for me, Chuck. I will let you take it out from here.
Just one thing I want to say about the pick videos that Chris has been putting out. I feel like it's natural to kind of look at them and say, okay, well, I can't draft this exact team because this is a cookie cutter build. But Chris built it out so that it has the perfect correlation. Like, I think that if you can get the exact team and that's what you're going for, then you should go for it because you're not going to be able to get that exact team very often, if ever. So I don't think you have to stray too far away from what he's doing. Not that many people are going to have that exact build. And I think you should just be going for it. They're good builds.
No, I appreciate that, Chuck. That's definitely the idea of this is what you should be aiming for. If you miss on a player that correlates with one of your early players, as we did here tonight, there are always going to be options in the later part of the draft to try to kind of come back around and recorrelate. So appreciate that, Chuck. I will talk to you soon, and we'll talk to everybody next time.
Yep. See you guys. Thanks. And